or not like most teenagers, let me change that, like some teenagers. I found myself pregnant with my son, and I ended up dropping out of college and taking care of him. And I thought of myself as a statistic for many years because I was a female, black, and with a child. And I thought, I've let so many people down. But as it turns out, I didn't. I mean, I may have let myself down, but at that time, I thought I'd let, my parents down. I'd let my mom and dad down. And of course, I know I haven't talked very much about my dad, but my dad passed away when I was 15. And he was in our lives, but he wasn't in our lives. My dad was very ill. He suffered from what they called, at that time, they called it shell shock. Now they call it PTSD. He was in the service and he served in the war, and apparently he saw some very bad things that affected him tremendously. And so I never blamed my dad for not being there because I understood his condition would not allow him to. So, but it did make things very hard on my mom, with her taking care of us. But like I said, we never suffered. I never had a bad time as a child growing up. I always had a wonderful Christmas. I always had a wonderful summer. Every summer, because my mom had so many brothers and sisters, my sister and I would travel from my mom's house in Knoxville, Tennessee. We would travel to Dayton, Ohio, and spend 2 weeks of the summer there with my uncle, and then 2 weeks of the summer at another part of Dayton, Ohio with my aunt. And then we would travel to Youngstown, Ohio, and spend 2 weeks of the summer there. So we did a lot of traveling during the summer. And then we would go to my grandmother's, who lived in Middlesboro, Kentucky, and we would spend 2 weeks there. And then, of course, during the holidays, we would go to my grandmother's and spend time with her as well. So my summers were always filled with wonder and enjoyment and just lots of fun. And growing up, I think about how hard my mom worked. Of course, back then I didn't know, of course we don't pay any attention to how we're fed or what's being done to keep a roof over our heads and keep food on the table. We just know that it is, and mom and dad go off to work or do whatever they do. But in my case, I never thought about it. I knew that she worked and I knew she had lots of jobs, but to me, I thought that was normal. And so anyway, fast forward to now with my children, going through a divorce, and I thought I hung on as long as I could because I didn't want to put my children through growing up without a dad, because I grew up without a dad since, my dad was sick in the hospital and a lot. And so I didn't want to put my children through that. And I kind of stayed in the marriage a little bit longer than I should have. Sometimes we do that. We hang on to something that's long gone, long over, because we think that's what we're supposed to do, until death do us part, as it says in the Bible. And that's true to a point. But there comes a time, even in the Bible, where it was sanctioned for divorce. And in my case, it just didn't work out, He wasn't faithful, so I left. And I ended up becoming a single parent, which ended up being a blessing in disguise. You know, it was really hard. I had to, when I left, and of course I moved back to Knoxville because at the time we didn't live here. We lived in another town. But I moved back home to Knoxville, and I lived in the housing projects. Now, that sounds really bad when you say it out loud, but it actually ended up being a blessing because I learned how to become self-sufficient. I'd never lived on my own before. I went from living with my mom to living with my sister to living with my husband. And this was the first time that I'd ever lived by myself. So I had to learn how to pay bills on my own, which, you know, when I was married, my husband would give me money and say, here, pay this bill, and that's what I did. But being on my own, I had to learn how to manage all of my finances myself. And I had to learn the balance between paying bills and buying the kids stuff that they wanted, or even stuff that they needed, like clothes and shoes. And there were a lot of times when I didn't have that kind of money. And so luckily, there were programs out there. There were programs where I would take advantage of because I didn't have the money to go buy shoes. I remember, you know, I didn't get child support, so I would have to figure it out on my own. And there were times where I would go to the school and they have these coupons at the school that they would give to people that couldn't afford shoes. And I would get the coupons, and they called them vouchers, and they had clothing vouchers and shoe vouchers. And I would get those and, you know, take the kids and go to this place that would give them free clothes and free shoes because I couldn't afford it. I remember getting vouchers to go to the Shriners. Our local Shriners here have a program where they would allow the children twice a year to come and get free shoes. And they were really nice shoes, tennis shoes that the kids could wear. And remember, I had 4 kids to take care of. And being a single mom of 4 children made it hard. I mean, I was doing everything I could to keep food on the table and keep a roof over our head. And so, yes, I was on food stamps there for a while. I was on welfare where I got a check because, of course, there was a period of time where I had a hard time trying to find a job. So I kind of worked. I finally did find a job, and I worked and I saved and I got us out of the projects. My first house, I saw an empty house and they had a for rent sign, and I called it up and I said, how much do you want for this house? And the lady said, well, we want $700 a month. And I said, well, I can't afford that. And so the lady said, well, you know, tell me about yourself. And I said, I'm a single mom. I have 4 children, and I can't afford $700 a month. And she says, well, the lowest we can take is 5. And I said, I can't even do 5. And she said, well, how much can you afford? And I said, I can afford $300 a month. So my first house, I got $300 a month, and which was a blessing and a curse all at the same time, because the wintertime hit. The summertime was great, but the wintertime hit, and it was a 2-story house, and it was beautiful, but it wasn't very well insulated, and my utilities were crazy. So I ended up having to go to places like the Salvation Army and the local utility board and ask for help with my utilities. Now, I don't know about you, but there are a lot of women, a lot of single men, single parents, I should say, out there that are struggling. So I just want you to know, you are not in it by yourself. We have all had to go through something at some point in our lives, and this was my thing. I had to struggle, but as I said, it was a blessing in disguise because it taught me how to manage. And finally, when I finally found a really good job, I started making more money than I'd ever made before. And it was wonderful because now I could afford to take care of my children, take care of my family, and I ended up saving enough that I was able to buy a house. And it was the first house that I bought. It was a 4-bedroom, 2.5 bath house, split foyer, very nice, had a fireplace in it, had a pool in the backyard. It was an above ground pool. It wasn't one of those built-in pools. I wasn't making that kind of money, but it was good enough. And the kids they had a blast, they had a ball. And you know, I was able to save. Now here's the thing. It was so funny because as a single parent, for some reason in the neighborhood, my house was always the house where all the kids wanted to come. And they'd come over and hang out. And people thought we were rich. Isn't that funny? They thought we were rich. But what they didn't know is I saved every dime that I had. And I would make big purchases instead of buying, like at Christmas time, instead of buying a bunch of toys that they didn't need or they would tear up or throw away. I would buy a computer that everybody in the house could use. One year I bought a big screen television. The first Christmas, I bought the house. That was a present to everybody. The second Christmas, I bought a computer that we could all, use. At the time, computers were like $600-700 for the big tower systems. When they first came out, they were ridiculously priced, and I got the cheapest thing I could find. And then the next year, I bought a big screen television, and it was the great big huge cabinet-sized TV. It was a 52-inch television projection screen, and that thing, it was probably about $900, but that was a gift that we could all enjoy. So it wasn't like I was spending frivolously, but it took every dime I had. And then the next year, the fourth year, we took our first cruise. And I'd saved all year long, and we went on this cruise and had a blast. And I remember the first day on the cruise, my kids talked me into playing bingo. And I won $500 in bingo. And so I ended up taking $100 of that, and I went to the casino that night. The kids, they had this game room on board the ship, and I went to the casino, and the kids went into the game room, and I gave them a bunch of quarters, and I was like, you don't leave out of this spot. And I went in and played the one-armed bandit, and I played for $1 a pull, and I won another $500 that night. So we had a great time. We went ashore the next day, then we went back to the boat, and the next night I thought, I'm going to try my luck one more time, and I went. It was only a 3-day cruise, mind you, but I went back the next night and I won another $300. So basically I ended up getting all of the money that I'd spent back. So we ended up, on the way back home, we stopped in Atlanta and spent a couple of days in Atlanta, and we went to the Coca-Cola factory, and we went to the Braves stay